We begin our journey, not in the sun-scorched sands of Egypt, nor within the hallowed marble halls of the Vatican City, but in the quiet space of the whole and human spirit, that innate unquenchable thirst for origins, for meaning, for a connection to a past, that feels both profoundly distant and strangely intimate. It is a thirst that has fueled empires, inspired revolutions, and built the very foundations upon which our understanding of civilization rests. And yet, for all we have uncovered, for all the monuments we have restored, and the scrolls we have deciphered, there persists a whispering notion, a tantalizing suspicion, that the story we have been told is incomplete, that crucial chapters of our human narrative are missing, perhaps lost to the relentless decay of time, or perhaps, more intriguingly, intentionally removed, concealed, locked away from the eyes of the world. This is the enduring allure of the secret, the hidden truth, and it finds its most potent expression in the enigmatic relationship between one of the world's oldest spiritual traditions and one of its most powerful religious institutions, the ancient civilization of Egypt and the eternal Catholic Church. For centuries, the narrative has been one of clear separation. On one side, the polytheistic tomb-building, pyramid-erecting Egyptians, a culture obsessed with death and the afterlife, their gods with animal heads, and their pharaohs divine kings. On the other, the monotheistic, church-building, soul-saving Catholics, their faith centered on the sacrifice and resurrection of a single man, their power emanating from the throne of St. Peter in Rome. They are presented as two distinct streams of human belief, separated by millennia, geography, and fundamental doctrine. But what if this clear separation is an illusion? What if, beneath the surface of accepted history, these two streams are deeply intertwined, connected by a subterranean river of shared symbols, suppressed knowledge, and a historical encounter so pivotal that its true nature had to be obscured? The theory that the Vatican holds, and has deliberately suppressed, ancient Egyptian secrets is not a new one, but it is one that has gained remarkable traction in the modern imagination. It is a premise that fuels best-selling novels, popular documentaries, and endless speculation online. It is often dismissed by mainstream academia as conspiracy theory, a fringe idea lacking in concrete evidence. Yet, its persistence is a historical phenomenon in itself, worthy of exploration. Why does this idea resonate so deeply? What is it about the land of the Pharaohs and the seat of the papacy that invites such profound mystery? To understand the gravity of this claim, we must first appreciate the sheer magnitude of what ancient Egypt achieved, and, more importantly, what was lost. For over 3,000 years, the Nile Valley was the stage for an unprecedented flowering of human civilization. And physicians who documented treatments for ailments with a methodology that would not be out of place in later ages. Their understanding of the world was encoded not just in stone hieroglyphs, but in a complex system of symbols, rituals, and a sophisticated theology concerning the nature of the soul, the journey after death, and the possibility of resurrection. The great repository of this knowledge was the legendary Library of Alexandria, the intellectual crown jewel of the ancient world. It was said to house hundreds of thousands of scrolls, containing the entirety of human knowledge up to that point, works of science, philosophy, history, and poetry from Greece, Rome, India, Mesopotamia, and of course, Egypt. Within its vast archives, it is believed, were the original pristine teachings of the Egyptian priesthood, the detailed accounts of their initiatory rites, their advanced astronomical observations, and perhaps even records of a wisdom tradition predating the dynastic pharaohs themselves. The destruction of this library, a tragic series of fires and conflicts spanning centuries, represents one of the most catastrophic losses in human history. It was as if the collective memory of the ancient world suffered a traumatic amnesia. When the last flames died down, the direct, unfiltered voice of Egyptian wisdom was largely silenced, surviving only in the inscriptions on temple walls, the texts within tombs, and the scattered, often misinterpreted, accounts of Greek and Roman historians. Into this vacuum of lost knowledge stepped a new power. As the Roman Empire crumbled and then transformed, the Catholic Church emerged as the dominant spiritual and political force in Europe. It was an institution tasked with unifying a fractured continent under a single faith, a process that required not just evangelization, but often the assimilation or suppression of competing beliefs. The old pagan gods of Rome and Greece were demonized or recast as saints. Local folk traditions were absorbed and Christianized. The church became the sole arbiter of truth, the gatekeeper of permissible knowledge, the curator of reality itself for the Western world. Its immense archive, the Vatican Apostolic Library, grew into a treasure trove of unimaginable scope, containing millennia of accumulated documents, letters, theological works, and, as many suspect, artifacts and texts recovered from ancient sites across the Mediterranean world. This sets the stage for our central mystery. The Church, in its long and complex history, has amassed an archive that is, by its very nature, secret. Not all of its holdings are public. Indeed, vast portions remain inaccessible to all but a select few scholars with specific permissions. What lies in those restricted vaults? Is it merely a collection of fragile, politically sensitive, or theologically challenging documents from its own history? Or could it contain something far older? Something that does not belong to the history of Christianity at all, but to a world that preceded it by thousands of years. The possibility arises from a few tantalizing historical threads. What became of the contents of the Library of Alexandria? Could some scrolls have been saved, transported to the safety of Rome or Constantinople before the final destruction? When the Christian Roman Emperor Theodosius issued decrees in the late 4th century banning pagan rites and ordering the destruction of temples, what happened to the sacred texts and artifacts seized from the now forbidden Egyptian temples? Were they all destroyed as ordered, or were some, recognized for their immense value or power, quietly transported to the capital? Later, during the Renaissance, as Europe rediscovered classical learning, the papacy was one of the primary sponsors of archaeological digs in Italy and beyond. What did they unearth? And in the Napoleonic era, when European Egyptomania exploded after the general's campaign in Egypt, the Vatican was perfectly positioned to acquire the most significant finds through its extensive network. This narrative will delve into these questions, tracing the faint but persistent trail that leads from the banks of the Nile to the hidden archives of the Vatican. We will explore the startling parallels between Egyptian and Christian iconography, the trinities of gods, the virgin births, the dying and rising saviors, the judgment of the soul. We will examine the historical moments of contact and conflict, from the early church fathers who wrote about Egyptian beliefs to the Renaissance popes, who were fascinated by Hermeticism. We will consider the accounts of those who claim to have seen things they should not have, and the logical reasons why an institution built on a specific revelation might seek to control a competing and perhaps dangerously similar narrative. This is not an accusation, but an inquiry. It is a journey into the shadowy intersection of faith, power, and history. It is an attempt to listen for the echoes of a lost wisdom that might still resonate from behind the world's most famous walls. The secrets of ancient Egypt, if they indeed rest within the Vatican, are locked away not by a simple key, but by centuries of silence, dogma, and the relentless weight of history. Our task is to understand why they might be there, what they might be, and what their revelation could mean for our understanding of who we are and where we come from. The story begins with a civilization's light being extinguished and another rising in its place, perhaps holding the fragments of the old flame, keeping it hidden, waiting for a time when the world is ready to see its light without being blinded. To believe that the Vatican might hold ancient Egyptian secrets, one must first accept the possibility that a connection exists, that the two are not hermetically sealed worlds, but rather that one may have been profoundly influenced by, or even built upon, the foundations of the other. This is not to suggest a simple copy, but a complex process of absorption, adaptation, and reinterpretation, a common phenomenon in the evolution of religious thought. The evidence for this is not found in a single smoking gun document, but in a mosaic of parallels, a chorus of echoes that resonate across the centuries, suggesting a shared spiritual vocabulary. These echoes are etched in stone, woven into ritual, and embedded in the very core of their most sacred beliefs. Let us begin with the most powerful and pervasive concept, life after death. The ancient Egyptian civilization was, more than any other, obsessed with the journey of the soul beyond the physical plane. Their entire culture, from the construction of the pyramids and the elaborate tombs in the Valley of the Kings to the meticulous practice of mummification, was designed as a vehicle for safe passage into the afterlife. Central to this belief was the weighing of the heart ceremony, detailed in the Book of the Dead. Upon death, the individual's soul would be led to the Hall of Judgment presided over by Osiris, the Lord of the underworld. There, the deceased's heart, the seat of conscience and morality, was placed on a scale balanced against the feather of Mat, representing truth and cosmic order. If the heart was found to be lighter than or equal to the feather, the soul was granted eternal life in the field of reeds, a paradise of abundance. If it was heavier, weighed down by sin, it was devoured by the monstrous Amit, resulting in a second, final death. The Christian conception of the final judgment, as vividly depicted in countless medieval frescoes and described in the Book of Revelation, bears a striking thematic resemblance. At the end of days, the dead are resurrected and brought before the throne of God. Their souls are judged according to their deeds. As recorded in the Book of Life, the righteous are granted eternal life in heaven, a kingdom of God, while the wicked are condemned to eternal punishment in hell. The symbolism of the scale, the divine judge, the recording of deeds, and the binary outcome of salvation or damnation are powerful parallels. While the Egyptian version is more personalized and occurs immediately after death, and the Christian one is eschatological and collective, the underlying architecture of moral accountability, divine judgment, and a post-mortem reward or punishment is remarkably consistent. Then we have the figures at the center of these dramas, Osiris and Jesus Christ. The parallels between the two are so numerous that they were noted even by early Christian scholars, who often dismissed them as demonic prefigurations, attempts by the devil to mimic the true story of Christ before it even happened. Osiris was a divine king, beloved by his people. He was betrayed and murdered by a treacherous rival, Set, who sealed him in a coffin and cast him into the Nile. After a period of mourning and search by his devoted wife Isis, Osiris was resurrected. Though he did not return to the land of the living, his resurrection was complete, granting him eternal life as the king of the underworld, the judge of the dead. He became the first mummy, and his resurrection promised the same for all his faithful followers. His symbol was the jed pillar, representing stability and resurrection. The story of Jesus Christ needs little elaboration. A divine king, beloved by his people, betrayed by a close follower, killed and tombed, and after 3 days resurrected, appearing to his followers before ascending to heaven, promising eternal life to all who believe in him. The themes of death, resurrection, and the promise of salvation for humanity are directly analogous. Both figures become the central focus of a salvation religion, an intermediary between humanity and a higher divine power, offering victory over death itself. The veneration of the mother figure provides another profound echo. In Egyptian theology, Isis was the archetypal mother and wife. She was the magician who resurrected Osiris, the mother who miraculously conceived and protected her son Horus in the marshes of the Nile Delta. She was often depicted in art nursing the infant Horus on her lap, an image of divine motherhood, protection, and sustenance. She was known as the Mother of God, referring to Horus, who was himself a god and the divine king. This iconography of the mother and child is one of the most powerful and enduring images to come out of ancient Egypt. Centuries later, the Christian world would be saturated with virtually identical imagery. The Virgin Mary, holding the infant Jesus on her lap, often nursing him or presenting him to the world. Mary is venerated as the Theotokos, the God-bearer, or Mother of God. The protective, nurturing, and sacred nature of the mother is emphasized in both traditions. The early church, in establishing itself in Egypt and across the Roman Empire, would have encountered the immensely popular cult of Isis, which was one of the most widespread religions in the Mediterranean world at the time of Christ's birth. The seamless transition for devotees of a loving, protective mother goddess from Isis to Mary would have been a powerful tool for conversion and a natural absorption of a deep-seated spiritual need. Even the concept of the Holy Trinity finds a precursor in Egyptian theology. While not a perfect doctrinal match, the Osirian triad of Osiris the father, Isis the mother, and Horus the son presents a divine family unit, a triadic expression of divinity that was deeply ingrained in the Egyptian religious mindset. Other major trinities existed, such as the Theban triad of Ammon, the hidden king of the gods, Mut, the mother goddess, and Khonsu, their moon god son. The idea of a god comprising 3 distinct aspects or persons was not a foreign concept in the ancient world into which Christianity was born. These parallels do not, in themselves, prove that the Vatican holds secret papyri detailing these connections. but they build a compelling case for a deep, underlying cultural and theological exchange. They suggest that early Christianity did not develop in a vacuum. It spread across an ancient world, rich with complex belief systems, and it naturally used the existing symbolic language and archetypal stories to express its own revolutionary message. The dying and rising God, the Divine Mother, the final judgment, these were concepts that resonated with people from Britain to Persia, because they tapped into universal human hopes and fears. The Egyptian expressions of these concepts were among the oldest, most detailed, and most sophisticated in the world. Therefore, the question transforms. It is no longer, are there similarities, but rather, how much did the early church know? Did the church fathers, many of whom were highly educated in classical knowledge, study these Egyptian beliefs? Were they aware of the parallels? And if so, did they see them as a threat to the uniqueness of the Christian revelation, a uniqueness that was the very source of the church's authority? If the story of Christ could be shown to have existed in a similar form thousands of years prior in the land of the Pharaohs, it could, in the eyes of a nascent institution fighting for its existence, undermine its claim to be the one true faith. This potential for doctrinal challenge provides the first and most fundamental motive for why such knowledge, if it existed in a tangible form, might need to be controlled, suppressed, or locked away. The echoes in stone are not just curiosities, they are the whispers of a pre-existing narrative, one that the official story may have needed to silence. If a river of knowledge flowed from ancient Egypt, then its delta, its grand and fertile endpoint, was the great library of Alexandria. To understand the magnitude of what might have been lost and what might have been saved, we must immerse ourselves in the legend and reality of this institution, for it represents the single greatest repository of ancient wisdom ever assembled, and its destruction is the gaping void at the heart of history. The fate of its collections is the first and most critical link in the chain of speculation that leads to the Vatican's secret archives. Founded in the 3rd century BC under the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Library of Alexandria was more than a building. It was an idea made manifest. It was the embodiment of a desire to collect all the knowledge of the world. The Ptolemies were ruthless in their pursuit of this goal. It is said that every ship docking in Alexandria's bustling harbor was searched by royal guards. Any scrolls found on board were confiscated and taken to the library, where scribes would copy them meticulously. The originals were often kept for the library's collection, while the copies were returned to the owners. The library also sent agents abroad with vast sums of money, with the sole purpose of acquiring rare texts from distant markets and temples. Through these methods, the collection grew to an almost mythical size, with estimates ranging from 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls. Within this vast archive, it is believed, were the true treasures of Egypt. While the temples of Thebes and Memphis held their sacred texts, the library aimed to be a universal repository. It would have housed not only the works of Greek philosophers like Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, but also the entire corpus of Egyptian priestly knowledge. This would have included the original, uncorrupted versions of the Book of the Dead, the intricate astronomical charts that allowed them to align pyramids with such precision, medical texts detailing surgical procedures, and herbal remedies far advanced for their time, and theological works explaining the deepest mysteries of the gods Osiris, Isis, and Thoth. This was not merely a collection of books, it was the collective consciousness of the ancient world, the sum total of its science, its philosophy, its poetry, and its faith. And then, it was gone. The destruction of the library was not a single, catastrophic event, but a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow decline over centuries that makes the story even more tragic. The first major blow is often attributed to Julius Caesar in 48 BC, during his civil war with Pompey. Besieged in Alexandria, Caesar ordered his men to set fire to the Egyptian fleet in the harbor. The flames are said to have spread to the city and consumed a portion of the library's warehouses, destroying an estimated 40,000 scrolls. While the main library may have survived, a significant portion of its collection was lost. The next centuries saw further decay under Roman rule, punctuated by periods of violence and religious intolerance. In AD 272, the Emperor Aurelian sacked the city during his war against Queen Zenobia, and the area around the library was severely damaged. Then came Theodosius I, the Christian emperor who, in AD 391, issued a series of decrees outlawing pagan worship, the Serapeum, a magnificent temple to the god Serapis, that likely housed a daughter library or a significant extension of the main library, was ordered destroyed by Theophilus, the Patriarch of Alexandria. Christian mobs, fervent with zeal, are recorded to have ransacked the temple and its associated libraries, burning countless scrolls they deemed heretical. The final act is shrouded in even more mystery. The Arab conquest of Alexandria in AD 642 brings with it another persistent legend. The story goes that the conquering general Amr ibn al-As asked the Caliph Umar what should be done with the books. Umar reportedly replied that if the books contained what was in the Quran, they were superfluous, and if they contradicted the Quran, they were heretical. In either case, they should be destroyed. The scrolls were then distributed to the city's bathhouses as fuel for the furnaces, where it is said they burned for 6 months. While many modern historians doubt the veracity of this account, it persists as a powerful symbol of the complete and utter eradication of knowledge. This series of disasters presents us with a haunting question: was everything lost? Could anything have been saved? The idea that scholars, priests, or officials, seeing the tides of war and fanaticism rising, could have smuggled out precious texts is not only plausible but likely. The library was the center of the intellectual world for centuries. Its scholars would have known the value of what they guarded. Scrolls could have been hidden in subterranean vaults, secreted away to remote monasteries in the Egyptian desert, or transported to other centers of learning that were, for a time, safer. Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, is a prime candidate. As Alexandria declined, Constantinople rose, and its imperial library became a new repository of ancient knowledge. Could shipments of Alexandrian scrolls have been sent to the safety of the Byzantine capital before the final collapse? This is where the trail begins to point toward Rome. As the Western world descended into the Dark Ages, the Church remained the only institution with the stability, resources, and crucially, the motivation to preserve ancient texts. While many were destroyed for their pagan content, others were painstakingly copied by monastic scribes, often Christianizing the content in the process. The Vatican Library, formally established in the 15th century but built upon much older collections, became the new ark of knowledge. It collected manuscripts from across the known world, including those rescued from a fallen Constantinople when it was sacked by the Ottomans in 1453. Greek scholars fled to Italy, bringing with them precious ancient texts that had been preserved in the East for a millennium. What if among those texts were not just the works of Plato and Aristotle, but also the lost scrolls from Alexandria? What if the theological and scientific works of ancient Egypt, deemed too dangerous for general consumption, were identified, separated, and placed under lock and key? The Church, in its role as the guardian of orthodoxy, had a profound incentive to control this narrative. The discovery of Egyptian texts that predated Christ yet contained striking parallels to his story would have been explosive. It could have been seen not as a prefiguration, but as a template, challenging the divine uniqueness of the Christian revelation. Therefore, preserving such documents not for dissemination but for suppression becomes a logical, if unsettling, possibility. The silence that followed the burning of the Library of Alexandria may not have been absolute. It may have been a silence enforced, a secret kept within the vaults of a new powerful institution that understood the world-altering power of knowledge. The existence of parallels and the possibility of surviving texts are one thing, but for the theory of deliberate suppression to hold weight, we must establish a compelling motive and a viable method. Why would the most powerful institution in Christendom go to such lengths to sequester ancient knowledge? And how could such an operation, spanning centuries, remain so effectively hidden? The answers lie in understanding the fundamental nature of the Church as both a spiritual guide and a political entity, an institution tasked with protecting not just souls, but its own sovereignty and doctrinal purity. The primary motive is, and has always been, the preservation of orthodoxy. From its earliest days, the Christian Church was engaged in a constant battle against heresy interpretations of the faith that deviated from established doctrine. Groups like the Gnostics, who claimed access to secret knowledge, gnosis, that offered salvation, were vigorously persecuted, their texts destroyed, and their followers excommunicated. The Church's authority was derived from its claim to be the sole inheritor of Christ's message, transmitted through an unbroken line of apostles and priests. This authority was monolithic and non-negotiable. Now imagine the threat posed by a well-documented, sophisticated theological system that predated Christianity by thousands of years and yet contained a strikingly similar core narrative. A divine trinity, a dying and rising God, a virginal mother of God, a final judgment, and a promise of eternal life. This would not be a fringe heresy from a small sect. It would be the state religion of one of the greatest civilizations in history, whose architectural and cultural achievements still inspired awe. If such parallels became widely known and discussed, it could fundamentally undermine the Church's claim to uniqueness. It could suggest that Christianity was not a divine revelation, but a sophisticated syncretism, an adaptation of much older pagan myths. This was a threat that could not be countered through debate alone. It had to be managed. Controlling this knowledge, ensuring it never entered public discourse, became a theological necessity. The truth, in this case, was too dangerous for the average believer, whose faith might be shaken by such revelations. Closely tied to this is the concept of preparatio evangelicatha, preparation for the gospel. This was a doctrine articulated by early church fathers like Justin Martyr and Clement of Alexandria. They argued that Greek philosophy and, to a lesser extent, other wisdom traditions had been inspired by the Logos, the divine word, later identified with Christ, to prepare the pagan world for the eventual arrival of the true gospel. In this view, the parallels in other religions were not coincidences, but deliberate, divine clues, imperfect shadows of the truth that was to come in its perfect form with Jesus. This framework provided the Church with a tool to acknowledge similarities while simultaneously neutralizing their threat. The Egyptian mysteries could be dismissed as demonic parodies or dim, human-made prefigurations. However, this required careful curation. The Church had to control the narrative, to be the sole arbiter of what those parallels meant. Unfiltered access to the original Egyptian sources would have taken this power away. If scholars could independently study the full depth of the pyramid texts or the Book of the Dead, they might draw their own conclusions, potentially challenging the Church's authorized interpretation. Therefore, possessing the primary sources allowed the Church to define the conversation without the risk of contradiction. Beyond theology, there was a raw political motive. The Church's power in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance was not merely spiritual, it was temporal, financial, and geopolitical. It crowned emperors, levied taxes, and commanded armies. Its legitimacy was the bedrock of its political influence. Any challenge to its doctrinal primacy was a direct challenge to its political power. Knowledge is power, and the londwen on certain kinds of knowledge, especially historical knowledge that could alter the perception of reality, was a key instrument of control. By holding the only complete set of keys to the past, the Church could shape the present and future in a way that reinforced its own authority. Now, we must consider the means. How could an institution accomplish such a feat of long-term secrecy? The answer lies in its unique structure and history. The Vatican is not a nation-state with changing governments and public archives. It is a millennial monarchy with a culture of discretion, hierarchy, and internal discipline. Its vast bureaucracy, answerable ultimately only to the Pope, operated with the efficiency and opacity that was the envy of European kings. The heart of this system is the Vatican's secret archives. The word secret here is derived from the Latin secretum, meaning private or personal. It is the Pope's personal library, his private administrative records. For most of its history, it was utterly inaccessible to outsiders. Its contents were catalogued by a small, trusted group of clerics who took vows of confidentiality. This structure created the perfect mechanism for sequestration. A scroll discovered in an Egyptian-themed sarcophagus during a dig on church-owned land, a manuscript found in the ruins of a monastery library, a coded text brought to Rome by a convert seeking favor, all could be sent to the archives, logged in a private inventory, and placed in a restricted section, unseen by the outside world. The system was designed for confidentiality, making it the perfect repository for inconvenient truths. Furthermore, the Church was the primary sponsor of archaeology and exploration for centuries. During the Renaissance, popes excavated Roman ruins beneath the Vatican itself, unearthing pagan artifacts. Later, as Egyptomania swept Europe, the Church had its own scholars, agents, and diplomats in the region. They had the means to acquire artifacts and texts, often legally through purchase or donation, and the transportation networks to bring them back to Rome without scrutiny. The acquisition would not have been a dramatic raid. It would have been a quiet administrative process. Another crate of artifacts logged into the immense and private collection of the Supreme Pontiff. The motive and the means intertwined to form a compelling picture. The Church had a profound existential incentive to control historical narratives that challenged its primacy, and it possessed a unique, centuries-old institutional apparatus capable of executing that control with impeccable secrecy. It did not need to destroy every troubling text outright. It could simply remove them from the board of history, locking them away in a vault where they could do no harm to the faith of the masses or the power of the institution. The pillars of power are built not only on stone but on silence, and the Vatican had mastered the art of both. If the early and medieval Church was primarily concerned with suppressing and controlling ancient knowledge, the Renaissance marked a fascinating shift, a period of intense rediscovery, fascination, and ultimately, a renewed effort to control the powerful secrets that were bubbling back to the surface of European thought. This era provides some of the most compelling historical evidence for the Vatican's deep engagement with Egyptian wisdom, not through fear alone, but through a potent mixture of intellectual curiosity and a desire to harness its perceived power. The catalyst for this shift was the fall of Constantinople to the Ottoman Turks in 1453. Greek scholars fled the collapsing Byzantine Empire, carrying with them precious manuscripts that had been lost to the West for centuries. This influx didn't just include the works of Plato and Aristotle. It included texts that would ignite a philosophical revolution. Among the most important was the Corpus Hermeticum, a collection of texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest Hermes. Renaissance scholars believed Hermes was an ancient Egyptian sage, a contemporary of Moses, who possessed primal, divine wisdom that predated and even influenced Greek philosophy. In reality, the texts were likely written in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, but they were saturated with Egyptian philosophical concepts and a mystical Neoplatonic spirit. The discovery of the Hermetic texts was a thunderclap in the intellectual world of the Renaissance. Marsilio Ficino, the brilliant scholar working under the patronage of the powerful Medici family, was actually pulled off his task of translating Plato to immediately work on rendering the Corpus Hermeticum into Latin. Two thinkers like Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. This was not pagan heresy. It was Prisca, theologian, ancient theology, a pure source of divine wisdom that confirmed and prefigured Christian truths. They saw in Hermes a prophet of the Christian Trinity and a witness to the Logos. This belief granted Egyptian wisdom a new, respectable, and immensely attractive currency. It became the height of intellectual fashion to study these ancient mysteries, believed to contain the secrets of alchemy, astrology, and direct communion with the divine. This intellectual climate did not escape the corridors of Vatican power. The Renaissance popes were not just spiritual leaders. They were Italian princes, megalomaniacal patrons of the arts, and ambitious politicians. They surrounded themselves with artists, architects, and thinkers who were steeped in this Hermetic revival. The most striking example is the great artist and inventor, Leonardo da Vinci. His notebooks are filled with designs for perpetual motion machines, studies of water and wind, and anatomical drawings that seem to seek the divine geometry within nature. This was not just scientific inquiry. It was a Hermetic pursuit and attempt to understand the secrets of the universe, the same secrets believed to be held by the ancient Egyptian priests. The most dramatic and literal intersection of the papacy and ancient Egypt occurred not in a library, but underground. In 1506, within the boundaries of Rome itself, a sensational discovery was made: the buried statue of Laocoon and his sons, a masterpiece of Hellenistic sculpture. This find, unearthed in a vineyard near the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, sent a wave of excitement through Pope Julius II, a patron of Michelangelo and a voracious collector of antiquities. He immediately purchased the statue and put it on display in the Vatican. This event triggered a mania for excavation. The Pope and his cardinals began digging ferociously under their palaces and across Rome, unearthing a treasure trove of ancient statues, including the Apollo Belvedere and the Venus Felix. They were building the Vatican museums, in a sense, to house these pagan gods. But the most intriguing dig was the one that took place in 1480, under the orders of Pope Sixtus IV, in the very heart of Christianity, the St. Peter's Basilica compound. Workers, renovating the old basilica, broke through a wall and discovered a hidden ancient Roman cemetery, a necropolis. dating back to the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. This was the Vatican necropolis, later known as the Scavi. What they found was astonishing. Beautifully decorated pagan mausoleums belonging to wealthy Roman families, adorned with frescoes of gods and goddesses and intricate mosaics. But they also found something else: early Christian tombs. The two were intermingled, side by side. This was a physical revelation that the earliest Christians in Rome, including those who might have witnessed the martyrdom of Peter himself, were buried alongside their pagan neighbors, their art and symbols often mirroring the pagan ones around them. The image of Christ as the sun god, Helios, driving a chariot, found in a Christian tomb, is a prime example of this syncretism. For the Church, this was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was archaeological proof of early Christian presence. On the other, it was tangible, uncomfortable evidence of the very cultural blending and adoption of pagan motifs that the doctrine of Preparatio Evangelica was designed to explain away. The response was telling. The necropolis was not fully excavated and put on display. Instead, it was largely sealed up again, its entrance hidden. It became a restricted area, accessible only by special permission. The physical evidence of Christianity's deep connection to its pagan past was literally buried once more, this time under the authority of the papacy. The Renaissance, therefore, presents a complex picture. The papacy, through its patronage, actively encouraged the recovery of ancient knowledge, including Hermetic Egyptian wisdom. Yet, when that recovery became too physically immediate, too blatant in its demonstration of syncretism, as with the necropolis under St. Peter's, the instinct to control and conceal reasserted itself. The popes and their cardinals wanted the power and the prestige of ancient knowledge, but they could not risk the foundational narrative of their faith being undermined by it. They walked a tightrope, celebrating the rediscovery of Hermes as a forerunner to Christ, while ensuring that the original unfiltered sources of that wisdom, whether in text or in stone, remained where they could do no harm, under their direct control. The whispers from the East had been heard, but their fullest meaning was reserved for the ears of the powerful. The turn of the 19th century witnessed an event that would irrevocably shatter Europe's romantic, hermetic vision of Egypt and replace it with a tangible, empirical reality. This was the Napoleonic expedition of 1798. When General Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt, he did not come with soldiers alone. Accompanying his armor, Orient was a corps of 167 scholars, scientists, cartographers, and artists, the Commission des Sciences et Arts. Their mission was not merely military conquest, but cultural and intellectual annexation, to comprehensively document, study, and plunder the ancient civilization of the Nile. The floodgates were about to open, and a deluge of artifacts and information would pour into Europe, forcing institutions everywhere, especially the Vatican, to confront Egypt on its own terms. Napoleon's savants performed their task with breathtaking thoroughness. They mapped the Nile Delta, conducted geological surveys, studied the modern culture, and, most importantly, embarked on a systematic study of the ancient monuments. They measured the Sphinx, entered the tombs in the Valley of the Kings, and wandered through the colossal halls of the temples at Karnak and Luxor. Their work culminated in the monumental publication, the Description de l'Egypte, a multi-volume masterpiece of engraving and scholarship that presented Egypt to the European public with an accuracy and scale never before imagined. It was this work that truly launched the modern science of Egyptology. Crucially, the expedition also led to the single most important decipherment in history, the cracking of the Rosetta Stone. This black granodiorite slab, inscribed with a decree in 3 scripts, Greek Demotic and hieroglyphic, provided the key. While the stone itself was seized by the British and resides in the British Museum to this day, copies of its inscriptions were circulated among scholars across Europe. It was the French linguist Jean-François Champollion who, in 1822, finally achieved the breakthrough, using his knowledge of Coptic, the last stage of the ancient Egyptian language, to demonstrate that hieroglyphs were not just symbolic pictographs but a complex combination of phonetic and ideographic signs. This was a revolution. For centuries, scholars had relied on fanciful Greek and Roman accounts, or the mystical interpretations of the Hermeticists, to understand Egypt. Now, for the first time, the ancient Egyptians could speak for themselves. The inscriptions on temples, obelisks, and papyri could be read. The Book of the Dead could be translated, The true names of pharaohs and the precise details of their rituals and beliefs could be known. The veil of mystery was being pulled back, not by speculation, but by science. This explosion of knowledge presented the Vatican with an unprecedented situation. The old strategy of dismissing Egyptian beliefs as pagan superstition or benign prefigurations was no longer tenable. Now, trained philologists were translating prayers to Osiris and spells for the afterlife with academic rigor. The parallels were no longer vague similarities noted by church fathers. They were precise, translatable texts describing a resurrection cult millennia older than Christianity. The Church's response was multifaceted. Firstly, it engaged directly with this new wave of Egypt. The Vatican museums already housed a collection of antiquities, including Egyptian pieces acquired over centuries through donation and purchase. The 19th century saw a deliberate effort to expand this collection. Popes and their agents became active acquirers in the burgeoning antiquities market that flourished in the wake of Napoleon's campaign. Obelisks, statues, sarcophagi, and most importantly papyri, began to flow into Rome. The Vatican Library's holdings of Egyptian texts grew significantly, but acquisition is not the same as promotion. The second facet was control. With the means to now truly understand these texts, the Vatican was in a unique position. It could fund and support its own scholars, those within the Church, to study the new discoveries. This allowed for an internal, controlled interpretation. The Church could develop its own orthodox response to Egyptology, framing the new findings within the safe confines of Preparatio Evangelica, while assessing which elements might be potentially damaging. The third facet was sequestration. This is the core of the theory. As crates of artifacts and papyri arrived, the process of cataloging them within the immense and private Vatican archives would have provided the perfect opportunity for discretion. Imagine a scenario: a scholar, perhaps a Jesuit with training in ancient languages, is tasked with translating a newly acquired funerary papyrus. As he works, he realizes the text doesn't just vaguely resemble Christian themes. It describes a ritual of resurrection, a communion with a god through bread and wine, or a judgment scene that is startlingly specific. His report to his superiors would not be for public dissemination. The papyrus, deemed theologically sensitive, could be quietly moved from the museum's public collection to the restricted shelves of the secret archives. Its existence might be recorded in a private inventory, but it would be inaccessible to outside scholars who might draw the wrong conclusions. The Napoleonic expedition, therefore, did not end the Vatican's potential engagement with Egyptian secrets. It changed its nature entirely. It moved the conversation from philosophical speculation to philological fact. The Church could no longer ignore Egypt. It had to manage it. By becoming one of the world's leading collectors and repositories of Egyptian material, it positioned itself at the very center of Egyptological study. This gave it the ultimate power, the power to decide what was seen, what was translated, and what was hidden away. The flood of artifacts had arrived, but the Vatican, with its deep still waters, had the means to control its flow. The 20th and 21st centuries have brought waves of change that have fundamentally altered the relationship between the public and institutions of authority. The rise of critical scholarship, the advent of the digital age, and a culture of transparency have placed the Vatican under a scrutiny it has never before experienced. Yet, even as some doors have creaked open, the core mystery, the question of what truly lies in the deepest vaults, has not only persisted but intensified, evolving to meet the challenges of the modern world. A significant step towards openness was the decision by Pope Leo XIII in 1881 to officially open the Vatican's secret archives to qualified researchers from outside the Church. This was a monumental shift, born of pressure from the modernizing Italian state and a desire to counter accusations of obscurantism. For the first time, historians could apply to study the immense collection of papal correspondence, state documents, and records dating back over a millennium. This access has yielded invaluable historical insights, debunking many myths and confirming countless details about church history and European politics. However, this openness comes with significant limitations. The archives operate on a strict 75-year rule. Records pertaining to pontificates within the last 75 years remain closed. More importantly, access is not granted to the entire collection. Researchers must request specific documents using precise index numbers. One cannot simply browse the shelves. This system means that unless a scholar knows exactly what to ask for, the title, the date, the catalog number, a document remains effectively invisible. There is no public, searchable master catalog of every single item held in the archives, 53 miles of shelves. This structure inherently protects anything the institution does not wish to be found. A papyrus scroll or a coded manuscript from ancient Egypt, if it exists, would have no place in the standard indices for papal bulls or diplomatic correspondence. It could reside there, perfectly preserved and entirely unknown, because no one would know to request it. This controlled access has fueled modern speculation more than it has quelled it. The digital age, with its capacity for instant information sharing and community building, has given rise to a new form of scholarship and conspiracy. Online forums, documentaries, and books dissect every hint and rumor. They point to enigmatic artifacts within the Vatican museums themselves, such as the so-called Egyptian Museum collection, which, while impressive, is considered by some independent researchers to be a mere public-facing fraction of the true holdings. They analyzed the writings of mystics and whistleblowers, like the controversial accounts of Father Malachi Martin, a former Jesuit and author who spoke ominously of dangerous secrets and something terrifying buried in the archives that could shake the foundations of faith. The Church's response to these modern claims has often been a mixture of silence, dismissal, and occasional, carefully managed revelation. The official stance is that the theories are baseless fantasies, the products of overactive imaginations, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the Church's nature and history. Yet, the persistence of the narrative exerts a subtle pressure. Perhaps the most compelling modern chapter in this saga was the public exhibition of parts of the Borgia collection in 2019. This collection, assembled by Cardinal Stefano Borgia in the 18th century, is a treasure trove of global antiquities, including a significant number of Egyptian artifacts, papyri, and even pre-Columbian Mexican codexes. For decades, it was largely hidden from view, stored away. Its exhibition was a landmark event, a gesture of transparency. Scholars pored over the displayed papyri, which contained funerary texts and administrative documents. Yet, for theorists, this only deepened the mystery. If this previously hidden collection could be made public, what other collections remain unseen? Was the display of the Borgia collection a way to satisfy public curiosity without revealing anything more sensitive? The digital revolution presents both a threat and an opportunity for the Vatican. On one hand, there are ongoing projects to digitize millions of pages from the archives, making them available to a global audience online. This is a laudable effort towards preservation and access. Yet, critics note that the digitization project is highly selective and painstakingly slow. One can only digitize what one chooses to digitize. The process of selection itself is a form of curation, a final filter before the world is allowed to see. Therefore, the modern era has not solved the mystery. It has simply changed the battlefield. The questions are no longer asked, only in whispered rumors in dark libraries. They are debated in the bright light of the internet, with access to high-resolution, satellite imagery and digital copies of every publicly available text. The Vatican, in turn, has adapted, using the tools of public relations, selective exhibition, and controlled digital access to manage its narrative. The silence is no longer absolute. It is a sophisticated, modern silence, maintained not by barred doors alone, but by firewalls, access protocols, and a 75-year rule. The ancient Egyptian secrets, if they are there, are now locked away in the most secure vault of all. The digital dark age of an analog archive, waiting for a keyword search that may never be typed. The persistence of the mystery in an age of transparency is, perhaps, the most compelling evidence that some truths remain, as they have for millennia, under the strictest guard. Beyond the historical analysis, the archaeological evidence, and the political machinations, there lies a deeper, more profound reason why the idea of ancient Egyptian secrets locked in the Vatican captivates us so intensely. It endures because it speaks to a fundamental human yearning, a psychological and spiritual void that exists in the modern psyche. This is not merely a conspiracy theory, it is a powerful modern myth, a narrative that fulfills a deep-seated need for meaning, for origin, and for a lost wholeness. We live in an age of incredible technological advancement, but also of profound spiritual disenchantment. The grand narratives of religion that once gave purpose and order to the universe have, for many, receded in the face of scientific materialism. We understand the mechanics of the cosmos, from the quantum to the galactic, but the question of why we are here, the question of ultimate meaning, often goes unanswered by science. This has created a hunger, a vacuum that seeks to be filled. The theory of hidden knowledge offers a tantalizing solution. It suggests that the answers do exist, that a profound spiritual truth was known to the ancients, but it has been lost or stolen. The problem is not that there is no meaning. The problem is that the meaning is being withheld from us. This is a far more comforting and exciting proposition than the existential dread of a universe without inherent purpose. It replaces nihilism with a mystery, and a mystery can be solved. This connects directly to a widespread disillusionment with traditional institutions of authority. Governments, corporations, and even religious organizations are often viewed with deep suspicion, accused of prioritizing their own power and agendas over the well-being and truth of the people. The idea that the Vatican, a millennia-old pillar of established power, is hiding the truth is a perfect expression of this distrust. It confirms a pre-existing belief that those in charge are not being honest, that reality is manipulated behind closed doors for the benefit of the few. The secret becomes a symbol of this broader systemic deceit, and the quest to uncover it becomes a righteous rebellion against opaque authority. Furthermore, the ancient Egyptians themselves represent, in our collective imagination, the pinnacle of a lost golden age. They are synonymous with mystery, with esoteric wisdom, with a direct and harmonious connection to the cosmos. Their achievements, the pyramids aligned with celestial precision, the art that lasted millennia, the complex mythology seem to whisper of a knowledge we have forgotten. By believing that their core secrets still exist, we maintain a connection to that golden age. We can tell ourselves that our current state of confusion is not permanent. It is merely a period of ignorance, and the key to transcending it is waiting to be rediscovered. The Vatican, in this narrative, becomes the dragon hoarding the treasure, and we are the heroes who seek to reclaim it for all humanity. This taps into a powerful archetype, the concept of a unified field of ancient knowledge. Many alternative history theories propose that before the rise of our known civilizations, there existed a primordial, global culture of immense sophistication, often referred to as Atlantis, or by other names. This culture supposedly possessed a holistic understanding of the universe, where science, spirituality, and art were not separate disciplines but different expressions of the same fundamental truth. The Egyptians, in this view, were not the originators but the inheritors and preservers of this Atlantean wisdom. Therefore, finding the true secrets of Egypt is not just about understanding one culture. It is about unlocking the lost knowledge of a primordial human civilization, a true history of our species that would revolutionize everything we know. The Vatican's potential role in this is as the unintended guardian of this flame, whether through deliberate suppression or simply by being the only institution to have survived long enough to collect the fragments. It is seen as sitting on the truth. This makes the story incredibly potent. It's not just a historical curiosity, it's a spiritual quest. The seeker who pursues this truth is not just a historian. They are a modern-day knight on a grail quest, seeking the ultimate treasure that will restore balance and wisdom to the world. In the end, the endurance of the secret is a testament to its narrative power. It combines the thrill of a detective story with the depth of a spiritual journey. It allows us to be heroes in our own right, questioning authority and seeking a deeper truth. It promises that the emptiness of the modern world is an illusion, and that just out of sight, behind one locked door, lies the answer to it all. The Vatican's hidden Egyptian secrets may be a historical fact, a misinterpretation, or a complete fiction, but as a story, as a myth for our time, it is undeniably, powerfully true. It gives us a mystery worthy of our longing, a puzzle that promises, if solved, to make us whole. And so, the search continues, fueled not just by evidence, but by the deepest hopes of the human spirit. We have traveled a long path together from the sun-baked sands of Egypt to the marble halls of the Vatican, through the burning of the Great Library, the fervor of the Renaissance, the scientific onslaught of Napoleon's savants, and into the digital glare of the modern era. We have examined the parallels that whisper of a connection, the motives of power, the mechanisms of secrecy, and the profound human yearnings that keep this mystery alive. Now, as we near the end of our narrative, we must pause to reflect, not on the answer, for that remains hidden, but on the nature of the quest itself. What does this enduring search for suppressed Egyptian wisdom truly represent? And what are we to make of it all? The first and perhaps most important realization is that the question, does the Vatican hold ancient Egyptian secrets, is ultimately unanswerable through conventional means. The very nature of the claim makes it so. If the secret is perfectly kept, then by definition, there is no evidence of it. Any lack of evidence can be dismissed by proponents as proof of the effectiveness of the suppression. Conversely, any piece of evidence that seems to support the idea can be magnified and woven into the narrative. This is the hallmark of a belief system, not a historical hypothesis open to falsification. This does not make it false. It simply places it in a category beyond the reach of standard historical inquiry. We are in the realm of faith, of interpretation, of reading between the lines of history. Therefore, the value of this exploration may not lie in its conclusion, but in the questions it forces us to ask about history itself. Who controls the narrative? How is knowledge preserved, and how is it lost? The story challenges the comforting linearity of history. We are often taught the idea that knowledge steadily accumulates, and that we now stand at the pinnacle of understanding. Instead, it suggests a history of fits and starts, of catastrophic losses, of rediscoveries, and of deliberate silences. It reminds us that our current understanding of the past is a mosaic assembled from the fragments that survived, curated by the victors, the powerful, and the persistent. There are undoubtedly gaps in that mosaic, and the possibility that some of the missing pieces are hidden away is a thrilling and unsettling thought that should humble any historian. On a personal level, the quest for hidden knowledge is a metaphor for the individual's search for meaning. Each of us, in our own way, is sifting through the received narratives of our lives from family, culture, and education, questioning what we have been told, and seeking a deeper, more personal truth. We all have our own Vatican archives, those inner chambers where we lock away inconvenient truths or half-understood intuitions that don't fit our self-image. And we all have our ancient Egypt, a sense that there is a deeper, wiser, more authentic self buried beneath the layers of conditioning and time. The external search mirrors the internal one. The desire to unlock a physical vault containing lost wisdom is a powerful projection of our desire to unlock our own potential, to access a state of wholeness and understanding that we sense is our true inheritance. Perhaps, then, the greatest secret is not a specific papyrus or artifact, but a shift in perception, the real treasure that the ancient Egyptians might offer us. Through the very mystery that surrounds them, is the inspiration to look at our world differently. It is an invitation to see the sacred in geometry, to find cosmology in the alignment of a building, to understand ritual as a technology of consciousness, and to view the journey of the soul as the central drama of human existence. This wisdom doesn't need to be locked away to be accessed. It is encoded in the legacy they left in plain sight, their art, their monuments, and the translated texts we already have. The true suppression may not be of the information itself, but of our willingness to engage with it on a level deeper than the academic, to allow it to transform us. So, where does this leave us? We are left with a choice. We can dismiss the idea as a baseless conspiracy, a fascinating but ultimately empty fantasy. We can wholeheartedly believe in it, joining the ranks of those who see hidden hands in every historical event. Or, we can choose a third path, to hold the mystery as a question, not an answer, to see it as a narrative that, true or not, illuminates the shadows of history, challenges institutional authority, and speaks to a timeless human desire for connection and transcendence. The secret, in the end, has already served its purpose. It has compelled us to question, to explore, and to wonder. It has reminded us that history is not a closed book, but a living, debated, and deeply mysterious story. The doors of the Vatican's secret archives may never swing fully open to reveal a definitive answer, but the quest for the ancient Egyptian secrets locked within, real or imagined, has already unlocked something within us. Our curiosity, our skepticism, and our enduring hope that there is more to this world, and to our past, than meets the eye. And that, perhaps, is the most valuable discovery of all. Our journey through the corridors of history, power, and belief has reached its conclusion. Yet the final chapter of this story remains, and may always remain, unwritten. It exists not on parchment or in digital code, but in the silent space between what we can prove and what we feel in our bones to be possible. We have dissected the motives, traced the historical contours, and given voice to the whispers. Now, we must make peace with the silence, for it is in that silence that the true resonance of this mystery is found. Consider the sheer weight of time. Millennia have passed since the first stones of the great pyramids were laid. In that vast expanse, empires have risen and crumbled to dust. Languages have been born and died, and entire worldviews have been forgotten. The idea that a continuous thread of knowledge could survive such a span, passed furtively from hand to hand, from cult to priesthood, from library to archive, is a breathtaking concept. It suggests a tenacity to truth, a refusal to be extinguished, that is itself a kind of miracle. Whether this thread is real or a phantom of our longing, its very conception pays homage to the enduring power of ideas. It suggests that some truths are so potent they cannot be erased, only driven underground, where they wait like seeds for the right conditions to grow again. This leads us to the nature of the institution at the heart of our story. The Vatican is not a corporation or a nation-state with a limited lifespan. It is an entity that measures its life in centuries, that thinks in terms of eternity. Its actions are not dictated by quarterly reports or election cycles, but by a perpetual duty to guard what it perceives as the eternal truth of divine revelation. From this perspective, the sequestration of knowledge is not necessarily an act of malicious deceit, but one of profound custodianship. An archaeologist might seal a fragile tomb to preserve it from destruction. Could a similar impulse of belief that the world is not spiritually ready for a certain truth, that its revelation would cause more harm than good, guide the hands that lock the vaults? This is not to absolve the potential sin of suppression, but to understand it on its own terms, as a action born from a place of ultimate, perhaps misguided, responsibility. And what of the secrets themselves? We have spoken of papyri and artifacts, but perhaps we have been too literal. The greatest secret of ancient Egypt may not be a thing that can be held, but a mode of consciousness, a way of perceiving the universe that is fundamentally alien to our rational post-Enlightenment minds. Theirs was a world alive with meaning, where a hieroglyph was not just a letter but a vessel of symbolic power, where a temple was not just a building but a machine for interacting with the divine, where the journey after death was a detailed map of psychic transformation. This holistic, symbolic, and participatory understanding of reality is the true lost wisdom. A papyrus could describe it, but it cannot contain it. It must be lived, felt, and initiated into. This is a knowledge that cannot be stolen or hidden, only forgotten, and its recovery does not require a key to a Roman vault, but a key to our own perception. Therefore, the search for the Vatican's hidden secrets, for all its intrigue and drama, might ultimately be a distraction. It is a search for truth out there, in a hidden room, under guard. But the deeper search, the one the Egyptian mystics themselves would have urged, is the search in here, within the depths of our own consciousness. The real library of Alexandria was burned, but the one within us has only ever been waiting to be read. The rituals of opening the mouth, of weighing the heart, of navigating the Duatha underworld are not just ancient funerary practices. They are archetypal maps of inner transformation, of confronting our shadows, judging our own actions, and striving for a state of spiritual integrity. This wisdom is not locked away. It is encoded in the stories that have survived, available to anyone who chooses to engage with them, not as historical curiosities, but as living guides. So, we end where we began, with a thirst. The story of the ancient Egyptian secrets locked in the Vatican is a vessel for that thirst. It is a compelling, thrilling, and endlessly fascinating vessel. It has given us a narrative to explore, a mystery to ponder, and a dragon to chase. But let us not become so fixated on the vessel that we forget the water it is meant to hold. The thirst is for meaning, for connection, for a sense that the universe is intelligent, and that we have a place within it. Whether crates of papyri lie in a vault beneath the Vatican is, in the final analysis, secondary. The quest itself has been the prize. It has reminded us that history is deep and full of shadows, that wonder is a valid response to the world, and that the human spirit will always seek the light, even if it believes that light is being hidden. The secret has driven us to ask better questions, and in the world of wisdom, a good question is often more valuable than a definitive answer. The chapter is unwritten, and so it shall stay, inviting each new generation to pick up the pen and continue the story, to add its own voice to the eternal, whispering chorus of the quest for truth. The end is not an ending, but an invitation to keep looking, keep questioning, and, most of all, to keep wondering.